everyone. Welcome to this Kubefirst Live. And as you can see, today I'm not alone. John is back from vacation. How was vacation, John?
It was wonderful. It was almost as good as working at Kubefirst, Fred.
Oh, that is good. That is good. So today, in the past we have a couple of guests. We talked about their own technology, but we thought that we were due to do a deep dive on Metaphor. Metaphor, it's the Kubefirst platform exploration application that comes in your cluster. It comes with Kubefirst when you create a new cluster. We're gonna deep dive on Metaphor because we really think it's a great application. That you can use to learn more about your cluster, learn more about how the Kubefirst ecosystem is working. So without further ado, let's start about it. I don't know, John, if you want to talk to those points.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the Metaphor application is a bit of a Swiss Army knife. It helps us certainly describe in a very real way how microservice applications that have source code should build and deliver in a GitOps oriented way to a development, staging, production environment in your Kubernetes ecosystem. And there's a lot of questions that you'll have when you're setting up your first source code application on the Kubefirst platform. We deliver with Kubefirst this instant opinionated platform that has secrets management and HashiCorp Vault. It has Ingress with Ingress Nginx. It has automatic certificate creation with Cert Manager. It has automatic DNS management with external DNS. And all these pieces, conceptually, they're not that hard to describe and to talk about. But once it's time to start integrating these components with your application source code in a way that delivers to dev stage prod, we found that the Metaphor application is a really great way to help describe that story, first of all, but also once you have a Kubefirst platform, that's not the end of the road for you. So if you were to install Kubefirst to your organization today, you would have automatically this sample Metaphor application and some Argo workflows that could build and deliver these charts to a dev stage prod environment. But maybe you want to do more than that. And it's quite likely that you want to do more than that. You have an observability ecosystem that you'll want to hook your deployment details into. Maybe you'll want to add Trivy container scanning to your platform so that you can have automatic container scanning as part of your CI operations. Now, Kubefirst doesn't want to be overly opinionated about what those pipelines are. Every organization is going to be a little bit different in terms of the friction that they want to add into the shift left paradigm and how quickly they want to be delivering applications and how many components they want to be managing. So what we've done with the Metaphor app is basically provide you with a very good starting point so that you know how to deliver to dev stage prod, you know how to get secrets, you know how to get DNS and certs and all those details. But as you continue to evolve the Kubefirst platform, maybe you need to add a demo environment. Maybe you need to add some sequences of operations like container scanning as part of that pipeline. You need a place to test those things out. And when you have a Metaphor repository that delivers code the same way that you're delivering your real application microservices to dev stage prod, when you want to make a change, it's a perfect vetting ground for those changes. So like if you wanted to add container scanning, I can start experimenting with Trivy and messing around with how that's going to fit into my CI pipelines in this Metaphor application repo that is a real app and it does really deliver to your clusters. But I'm able to mess with it. So if I accidentally break it, nobody's actual application pipelines on my platform are broken. I get that opportunity to make sure things are really right before I start advocating for these changes to propagate to the actual real application delivery patterns of my company. So that's mostly what we use Metaphor for. I think I think a demo today is really going to show the nuts and bolts of how easy it is to get a source code application up and running on the Kubefirst platform. So
yeah, and two things before you start demoing or showing a little more how Metaphor is working within the cluster. The first thing is that for those of you that are not new to Kubefirst and heard a little bit about Metaphor, we talked about it in previous live stream. We moved the code inside the GitOps template repository. So if you want to have access to the code right now, you go on GitHub on Kubefirst/GitOps template, and it is in the Metaphor folder. That's going to be in a different place when you create your cluster. So within your GitOps repository, I think John's going to show you where, but the source code is there. It's still there. Don't be afraid. Even if we archive some repository, it's still out there. And the second thing is that the beautiful thing with Kubefirst, for whatever reason, you're listening to us, you're like, okay, Metaphor is beautiful, but that's kind of like something that I don't want in my cluster. It's fine too. No hard feeling because everything is in your GitOps repo. Once you create your cluster, it is your own thing. You do whatever you want with it. So you can just remove the YAML file on the component of Metaphor. And for the next sync wave or Argo CD, Metaphor is going to disappear like magic. So keep it if you like it. If you want to try it, it doesn't hurt to have it. But like if you don't want it, if you're like, oh my God, Kubefirst are putting stuff in my cluster that I don't want to, it's good for Metaphor. You can remove it if you want to. So on that note, I think the master of live stream demo is going to show you a little more about Metaphor now.
Yeah, we got a lot to show. So Fred, if I start babbling, just keep me on track because we got to get in and out of Metaphor today. You with me?
That sounds good.
Let's do it. And before I get into it, I do have to call out this t-shirt. My baby girl made this handmade Metaphor t-shirt. And this is the first time it's been on air. This is a hot commodity right here, ladies and gentlemen. You just can't do any better than a 10-year-old handcrafted Metaphor tee on a Thursday. I really just think you can't do any better than that.
That is pretty good. I was going to ask you after the live stream, like, hey, I've never seen that t-shirt. Like, what is that? And I was a little bit jealous. So.
Shout out to my baby girl, Lily. Hi, Lily. So let's get into... Yeah,
sorry. Just before you start, we've shown you a diagram on the slides. We didn't have time to make like an horizontal version for the live stream, so you may not seen all the details. Go on the documentation. Go in any stack of the documentation: AWS, Civo, Vultr, Google Cloud. Click on it. Go on the left menu. Click Explore and Metaphor, and you're gonna have the same diagram that we've shown you. If you really want to understand and have like a bigger, better version of that diagram, you want to see all the details. And on top of that, if you prefer to read about Metaphor, you have all great information also in the documentation.
Great call out, Fred. Thank you so much. So this screen that I've got up on my browser here, this is the result of a Kubefirst installation. It gives you this console app and basically just gives you a launching point to get into all your applications. Now, when you freshly install the Kubefirst platform, this square right here that has the Metaphor instances, they're going to show spinning wheels for a little bit. That's because when we do the Kubefirst installation, we register a new Metaphor application into your GitHub or GitLab organization, and then it automatically starts building the container, publishing the Helm chart, and then doing a GitOps delivery to your brand new dev stage and prod environment. While it's doing that delivery, DNS has to be established, certificates have to be collected. It takes a handful of minutes for all of that to shake out. So if you see those spinning wheels, it's nothing to worry about. It's just because you have a pipeline underway and we're waiting for the certificates to fully resolve before we show the links available on the console application.
And John, there is Happy from DigitalOcean that is listening to the live stream, and he would love to run Metaphor on Docs. So Like, just watch that live stream. You're going to see how to do it. And the beautiful thing is that DigitalOcean is now supported with Kubefirst. It's in beta. It's working pretty well, to be honest. But the only reason we keep it in beta is that we didn't go through the full exhaustive testing that we usually do before moving a cloud from beta to I'm looking for my word right now. I guess it's nearly the end of the week and I'm a little bit tired, but like going from beta to non-beta. But I would say it's probably coming close. But I try it many times. I would say you should not have any issue. And if you have any, please let us know. But watch a live stream and you can do it right now at home on DigitalOcean.
Yeah. No, I wish I knew Abby was going to be here. If I knew, it would have been on Docs for sure. It works really well on DigitalOcean. So, but let's take a look at what we get. So, right out of the box, when you do a Kubefirst install, you're going to get 2 brand new repositories added to your organization. I have a sample GitHub organization here called Your Company IO that we're going to be doing all this demonstration with. If you had your own GitHub organization, this would be your org instead of this fake Your Company IO organization. So when you dive into Metaphor, the repository here, this is it's basically just a sample, and I cloned this to my local host so I can show this view in VS Code instead. But it's a simple this is my GitOps repo. Sorry about that. So it's a simple little Next.js React application. The package JSON defines how the application gets built and started. It comes automatically with a Docker file. Now, when you have a microservice that you want to build and deliver on the Kubefirst platform, this file is one of your responsibilities. You can start with our Metaphor Docker file as a starting point, but you need to build your application the way that your application needs to be built. If it's a Node application, then it might be an npm command. If it's a Golang application, it might be a go build command. Whatever you need to do to build your app into a container, that's what you need to set up in this Docker file. Now, this particular Docker file is a multi-stage build process. So it shows you that process of like building everything and then just taking the output of the build and moving it to a slimmer container so that you can have kind of the smallest surface area on the application runtime. But in any event, the Docker file, you will have to tailor for your application's individual build and start instructions. Now, beyond that, we have a GitHub workflows folder. Now, the reason that we have a .github folder in here at all is because when I installed this platform, I said that I wanted it to be a GitHub stack instead of a GitLab stack. If instead I had said that I wanted it to be a GitLab stack, then it would have created a .gitlab CI YAML that would work architecturally the exact same way. It's just a little bit of a different structure for GitLab CI than it is for GitHub's Action Runner controller.
That's the beauty of the GitOps template. Like, if you go look at the source, you may be overwhelmed and like, hey, do I really need everything that is in the GitOps template repository? But like, when you create your cluster, we like pick and choose like the files that you need for your specific choice of like cloud, but also Git provider.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So if you take a look at the steps that are a part of this GitHub workflow, this is basically just going to do a publish operation and then deliver to development, then staging, and then it's going to do the release. So it's a pretty straightforward workflow. And you can see if you look into the details that when we do our publish or when we do our deployment to development, really all we're doing are some Argo submit events. Now we have Argo workflows running in this cluster already, and we have these cluster workflow templates or CWFTs that are just functions that are cluster-wide available in your management cluster. And they can execute some common tasks that we've established that we know that you're going to need. We know you're going to need to build a container. We know you're going to need to publish a Helm chart. We know that you're going to want to do GitOps continuous integration pipelines to deliver the desired state to a development, staging, and production environment. And we've taken care of all that automation for you. It's available to call. So the end result is when you have your own application, not the Metaphor repository, but you create one right next to it called your app or whatever your application is. Basically, all you have to do is take this charts directory, take the .argo directory, and take the .github directory, and just copy them in, and change the word Metaphor to whatever your application name is. And it's going to build and it's going to deliver to dev stage prod the exact same way Metaphor does. It's a really frictionless way to get automation in, and it puts the ownership of the automation in each individual application repository. So when your applications evolve and now all of a sudden you have database migrations that you need to do when you're promoting from development to staging, or whatever the thing is that you need to add, it's really easy to add those components into these Argo workflows so that you can extend what we start you out with to do all the things that you need to do for your application, whether it be CI testing or database migrations or traffic switching or whatever it might be that you're up against.
And quickly, John, what's the benefit of using like Argo workflow here?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So Argo workflow, CI in general, is kind of like talking about religion. Everybody kind of has their favorite one and they don't like to deviate from it. And we're kind of the same way. We were on GitLab for a very, very long time while our project was closed source. And when we were in a GitLab ecosystem, we just used GitLab runners, and GitLab runners were great and they fit the bill and it was easy and frictionless. And we do love GitLab runner. It's a great architecture, great system. But what it doesn't do is give you Kubernetes native CI. And what I mean by Kubernetes native CI, I don't mean that the tool is cloud native. Like GitHub Actions is indeed cloud native. It runs in Kubernetes very well. GitLab Runner is very much the same way. It is cloud native. It runs in Kubernetes. It runs in a container. It's fault tolerant, et cetera, et cetera. But what it's not is Kubernetes native, which is to say that there are things that you're going to have to do in your CI. You're going to have to, for example, maybe you want to keep your containers in Docker Hub as an example. And in order to publish those containers to your Docker Hub registry, you're going to want to have a username and password in your CI pipeline so that you have the credentials that you need to be able to publish that container to Docker Hub. Now, the way that non-Kubernetes native CI tools are going to set that story up is they're going to establish a set of name value pairs where you basically say, hey, I want these environment variables, and I'm going to set these sensitive values as secrets. And the CI job just has access to those secrets because they're environment variables that are scoped to the entirety of the CI pipeline. Now, the problem there is that you have to defend against unknown quantities of technologies that all may have access to those secrets. With a Kubernetes native CI tool, you can define these tiny little tasks, like just the part that publishes the container to Docker Hub. And it can be 2 lines of code that runs on a tiny little Alpine image. And when that 2 lines of code on an Alpine image is the only thing in the entire CI pipeline that has access to your Kubernetes native secret that has that sensitive value in it, then you've just reduced the amount of surface area that you need to protect against down to just these 2 little lines and an Alpine image that you can even set to be the latest image instead of pinning it to an image. And then you're always guaranteed to get the latest security vulnerability patches. And you only have these 2 lines of code that you need to defend against in terms of what might have access to those secrets. So it's a better security posture, in our opinion. It also provides Kubefirst with the added benefit of us being able to support endless numbers of Git providers. So GitHub, GitLab, we could add Bitbucket, we could add all kinds of different Git providers. And as long as they have a runner that can invoke an Argo workflow, we can have Kubernetes native CI, and tight control over our CI secrets, even though we're using these other technologies that don't have that same capability. And that provides the opportunity to get the CI results in the GitHub pull request, or in the GitHub Actions, or in the GitLab pipeline, or whatever it might be. You get that feedback back to the developer the way that they want that feedback. They want to stay in their code repositories. They want to see their jobs. So that's the advantage that Argo Workflows gave to us. That's why we ended up implementing it on that. So let's take a look real quick at, in fact, why don't we go ahead and kick off a deployment? Let's go to the README file, and we're just going to change any old thing about the README file in the main branch and push this thing up. And we have our automation. If we take a look at the main job here, whenever the main branch gets touched in GitHub Actions, this pipeline is going to kick off. So just by committing this, or in a real world scenario, you would create a branch, make a feature change, and then pull request it, get it reviewed. And then once it's approved and gets merged into main, that's what would trigger the job. You can also set this up to run different jobs off branches if you want to run CI tests or whatever it is that you might want to do. But for this particular example, we're just going to push that directly up to main. Let me do that. All right, and now that that is pushed, let's take a look at what's going on in GitHub itself. So we'll go to our console app, we'll go to the Metaphor repository, and then up here, we're going to go into actions, and we can see that a job is kicked off. There's a pre-job that kicks off. That's a detail about some bug that GitHub has. But then it's going to get into the publish, development, staging, and release process. And if you were to click on this and see the individual actions that are happening, you can see that this is kicking off an Argo workflow. So let's go to Argo workflows and sort of see it from that vantage point. So these 4 jobs here, these are the 4 that kick off just by installing Kubefirst. And this is the very first pipeline that's happened on this stack. I just provisioned this stack maybe like an hour or so ago. And if you take a look at this, you can see that there's these tiny little individual containers that are doing these tiny little tasks like publishing a container. And if we look at the logs from this, we'll wait for that. Let's take a look at it from a GitHub standpoint. Down here, you can see that the feedback of what's happening in the Argo workflow while it's building the container, publishing it, delivering it to dev stage prod, all that information comes back here into the developer's ecosystem. And if it was GitLab, it would be the same story. You would go to your pipelines and you would see that the work that was truly being conducted in your cluster in Argo workflows was all being proxied back to GitHub Action or GitLab Runner in that case, and the developer would be able to see it right there in their pull request, right there in the pipelines. So that's basically all that you have to do every time you deliver an update to dev stage prod. Now, our pipeline, the way that we deliver it to you out of the box, it just goes dev stage prod every single time. And every single time it delivers to production, it's going to do a version bump on the chart so that your chart is prepared for the next version of your software release that needs to go to production. Now, the way that manifests in the actual application itself, let's take a look at Metaphor. So if I load up Metaphor development here, this is what the Metaphor application is. There's not much to it. It's a simple React application, and it'll show you details like what chart is it that just got delivered to this environment, and what's the Docker tag that's associated with this chart, and what's the version of the Metaphor application that's running, And we have some details about some configurations that you can set on a per environment basis. And we have some details about some secrets that you can set also on a per environment basis. And that's really all you need in order to have an app that you deliver to DevStage Prod. You need a chart that you can publish, and then you need to be able to override that chart so that different instances of a dev instance or a stage instance or a prod instance of this application can have different configs, like how many different pods it should scale to, or what backend API URLs it needs to be calling. Or sometimes there's sensitive values that are different from environment to environment as well, like a database password, because you have a different database in dev and stage and prod. Maybe it's the same username, but a different password in each one of those instances. And you need a way to be able to separate that instance-oriented configuration, whether it's sensitive or non-sensitive. And the Metaphor application presents you with details about how that works, so that when you have real secrets, like obviously this isn't a real secret, it's just development secret 1. But when if it were a database password or something to that effect, you would be able to lean on the Metaphor application to see how to pull secrets into the application instance from Vault and manage those on a app instance by app instance basis. So here we have development, and here we have staging. Staging is going to look just about the same, except it has these staging secrets instead of development secrets. It's also running on a release candidate chart, because you haven't yet released version 0.0.1. But when you go through the release process, if we look at production, the release process will change the chart and change it from a release candidate chart to an actually fully published chart with a good Semper chart version. It becomes 0.0.1. And then in your Metaphor application, we're automatically going to bump the chart so that it's on the next minor version. So the next version of the application that got delivered would be a 0.1.0, and with a release candidate, and you could iterate on 0.1 until you go through a release process, and then it would bump and become version 0.2 for your next release track. So that's the automation that we have for managing charts and versions. The container images themselves are named after the short SHA of the commit that hit main that triggered the job. So there's a tight correlation between this value here, and if you went to the Metaphor application right here, the Metaphor application has a commit here of, let's see, we have 62F was the one that went to production. And then we had a automatic version bump to bump it to 0.1.0. That does not kick off a CI job. And then I added a change to the README file that produced a 2.8.7.5 commit on the main branch. So that next container that it should be building for development should have that. Let's see. Oh, and then I had a merge conflict. So it's actually going to be this 82C4 is going to be the next container. Now, where do the containers go? That depends today on which cloud we're talking about. So if you're talking about AWS or GCP, I think also GCP is in beta. Forgive me for not knowing that detail. In AWS, at least, we're producing the containers in AWS ECR. So we create an ECR registry with a repository per application, and it pushes there. There's a job that runs in your cluster that auto rotates a token so that you have access to push to that container. And so your pipeline is always guaranteed to be able to log in and push that to ECR, stays in your cloud, and that's the way that it works in AWS. Now, in some of these more lightweight clouds, like Civo or DigitalOcean or Vultr, they have sort of this nice, slim non-complex way to get managed Kubernetes, but there's no container storage. So what we're doing in those circumstances is we're leveraging the Git provider's container storage in order to host those images. So in GitHub, for example, if you were to go to your organization, this your company IO, you could go to packages here and you'll see that we'll have a metaphor automatically created for you. And as we produce container images, it's going to drop them right here. And we have the same story going on in GitLab. And that's probably going to end up being the default direction that we go for container images. Perhaps even in AWS, we'll continue to allow creation to ECR if you so choose with an option. But I think that as we become more and more portable on the Kubefirst platform, it becomes more important to kind of stay consistent across the clouds. So we're going to be leaning on the Git providers for container storage. Now, for the charts themselves, we have a Chart Museum instance that runs in your cluster. It's backed by cloud storage. So that's where we'll be housing the charts. And that's also built into the pipeline. So anyway, that's what we're doing from a container storage standpoint. We kicked off a deployment. Let's see how that deployment's coming along. We have metaphor here. And if we go to actions, we have, it's already done. So 9 minutes it took to do the container publishing, the chart publish, the GitOps desired state setting to a development staging production environment. You can see as you kind of dive into these things, all the results from Argo workflows come in here. Every time you see the color change from one color to the next, that's an indication that you've just left one container in Argo workflows and moved into another container in Argo workflows. So you can see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different steps there. And if we hopped into Argo, you would see the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps there.
So. Oh, I didn't know about the color output.
Yeah.
We learn a thing every day with John. That's great.
I know. Yeah, it's kind of neat. Although every once in a while they'll pick the color red and it'll scare the heck out of you. I know. You think it's an error and it's not an error. They just have the color red also. So.
I know this one caused me a lot of trouble because I was updating the docs release process because we host their documentation on a Kubefirst cluster, and I was playing with the Argo workflow. And I was like, what is wrong with that? And I was looking at the logs and I was like, it seems like everything worked well, but it was red.
Right.
Why? You don't choose red for all.
I know. Yeah, we got to add an if condition. We should submit a pull request.
Actually, we should.
I know. So anyway, that's sort of just like glossing over a lot of details, but that's the crux of our integration of Argo workflows with GitHub Actions. It's the same story with GitLab CI. You make a change to your main branch, it's going to publish and deliver to dev stage prod. Now, the chart itself is kind of interesting. So let's take a look at that together. I'm going to hop into the Metaphor repo. This is a local clone of the repo that you get right out of the box. And there's this chart here that is mostly an empty it's mostly a default chart. So how do you create a chart in the first place? If you're new to Kubernetes, this might be just one of these things that's that feels more complicated than it is. If you have Visual Studio and you add this Helm extension to your Visual Studio, you can hit Command-Shift-P on Mac or something else on Windows. And you can select this Helm Create Chart option here. And we'll call it a demo example chart, something boring and easy to identify. And it's going to create this folder right in your repo, wherever you are, called demo example chart. And this demo example chart is going to have a default Kubernetes chart that without giving it any information, like you're not telling, I haven't told it anything about my ports, about my image, about anything. So it's not right. But it will deliver a simple Nginx image to wherever you apply this chart. Now, that's not quite good enough. We have to go a little bit further to make the chart valuable to the application that it is that we're trying to host within this chart. Now, in our case, the Metaphor application, we wanted to have some config maps. We wanted to have an external secret so that it can pull secrets out of Vault using the external secrets operator. We have some opinions that like it should have an ingress by default because there's no point in having this particular application without one. And those are details that we can refine one of these automatically created charts and turn it into a chart that's specific to our application. So in order to exemplify that, we're going to take a look at what you get from a deployment YAML by default versus what it is that we've delivered with our chart, just so that you can see the differences between, boring old deployment YAML from a chart that you automatically create versus what we did. So if I do a compare here, you can see that a lot of the detail is just that our name is Metaphor. Their name is whatever name I provided when I said, please create a chart for me. There's some detail here about pod annotations. That's just because of Kubernetes versions that have shifted. This is where we're getting into some details that are super relevant to you when you're putting your first app on the Kubefirst platform, though. First is the image. We don't know what your application name is. We don't know where you're hosting that image. You could put it in Docker Hub. You could put it in ECR. You could host it any number of places like GitHub or GitLab. But that detail needs to be refined. And we also want to pull in some environment variables from a few different sources. And this is really just for example purposes. So first, we're going to look at env from here, and we're going to pull in a config map. And we have a config map in our chart that they don't have in a default chart. You can see up here, we have a cm.yaml for our config map, and you don't get one of those by default. Now, our config map is super straightforward. It's just a simple little config map with a templatized name, and it has two values, a config1 and a config2. Now, config maps are not sensitive. You're not supposed to put your secrets in a config map. Therefore, it's okay for these to be right in Git, and it's not a big deal. Now, what we're doing when we're in the chart directory, however, is we're defining the defaults for this particular application. So you wouldn't want to put any environment-specific details in this chart because this is just the chart in its generic form that you're trying to publish. Now, the instances of when this chart gets installed to development, staging, production, we're going to look at that in just a second. But you have an opportunity on each one of those instances to override the chart values so that you can drive the details that are different about your app instance from instance to instance, from dev to stage to prod. Maybe it's different host names. Maybe it's different configs, like how many pods you want running, details like that. That's all appropriate to put in the GitOps repo when you're defining your individual instances of these applications. But right here in the Metaphor application repo, we're just defining the generic defaults of what we want from the chart. So we added a config map. That's new in our chart. It doesn't come by default. And there's some details that we were looking at about the differences between the deployments. We're pulling in the config map details. So whatever environment variables were set in that config map are going to become environment variables in the Metaphor instance itself, just by having these 3 lines here. Now, in addition to that, you can add more environment variables by leveraging a secret ref. And this is how we're pulling secrets from Vault into the application, so that when you're looking at a Metaphor instance here and you see that it's production secret 1, the reason that's production secret 1 is because we pulled it in from a secret. So the way that we made that available is in the external secret object here. So the external secret object, this is one of the most powerful objects on the Kubefirst platform. You have a Vault backend that's pre-configured and has automatic authentication with your cluster. And we have this operator set up so that it can pull secrets out of Vault and turn them into native Kubernetes secrets that you can protect via RBAC. And that way, your applications themselves never have a real-time dependency on HashiCorp Vault. Now, you may be okay with real-time dependency on HashiCorp Vault. When we install Vault to your cluster, we install it in highly available mode. So there is that redundancy. If one of the pods were to crash, the other pod would elect itself leader. We have wrap storage set up in such a way that it's all just going to work out and stay operational. So you can depend on Vault real time if you want to, and it's well prepared to be highly available for that use case. I just don't want that burden myself. Like as a Kubernetes operator, I want to be able to mess around with Vault and potentially take it down. And if I take it down and it's down for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, if there are pods restarting that have a dependency on secrets that are in Vault, I need those to continue to start and run my production workloads, even though Vault is down at the moment. Now, in order to provide that architectural capability, we've implemented external secrets operator so that every secret that you want your application to have available to it, there's a shim layer in between Vault and your application that's just responsible for pulling the secrets out of Vault, making them Kubernetes native secrets available to your application. And this is what that looks like. This is basically just a simple external secret kind application. It's being managed by the external secrets operator that's deployed to your cluster. And there's a secret store ref where you have to give it a path basically in HashiCorp Vault of where you're going to get the secrets from. And then you define what secret it is that you want to pull the value from and what property you want to set it to in the actual Kubernetes secret that it's going to create. So if we took a look at that in HashiCorp Vault, you'll see, let me re-authenticate. You'll see that we have a development secret here with a subpath of metaphor, and I can share these secrets because they're not actually sensitive. We have these two quote unquote secrets of development secret 1 and development secret 2 for the values of secret 1 and secret 2. And that directly binds to secret 1 and secret 2 here for the properties, and it's going to create secret keys in our secret of secret 1 and secret 2. And that's what shows up in Kubernetes. And that's what we have the metaphor application depending upon is the Kubernetes secret, not the secret that's in Vault. You can see that also in Argo CD. If we were to take a look at the development environment, there's this external secret here. And if you pay really close attention, every 10 seconds, this object here is going to pulse. That's the external secrets operator reaching out to Vault, checking to see what the values are. And if there's a delta, it's automatically going to apply the new values to the secret YAML. And then the next time this pod restarted, it would be able to get those new secrets. You can also use this tool called Reloader to automatically apply secrets and restart those pods automatically. We have Atlanta set up that way. But Metaphor, we have it set up so that if you deploy a secret, that secret's just going to sit there until the next time you do a deployment or roll the pods. And then those new pods will pick up the new secret. So let's see. We talked about the chart directory. We just barely touched on Argo in that GitHub is making calls to Argo. I didn't do anything to highlight that particular directory up here, though. This is the workflow for deployment and for publishing and for release. And this is the actual workflow itself. So if you wanted, when you publish a new container in Helm chart, for example, if you wanted to publish the container and check out the chart version and then set the chart version and then publish a Helm chart and then do one more thing, like do a container scan or to do Slack notification to your development channel that some application delivery just went to development, or whatever it is that you want to add to the Kubefirst platform for your CI pipelines. It's just a matter of adding one more of these sections. And we have our CWFTs implementing these template refs. And these are the CWFTs that all come with the Kubefirst platform. You can add to that library if you want and create your own libraries, or you may just want to put your templates in line right here in the YAML itself, and you can do that too. There's some great examples in Argo workflows where you can see different ways that you can execute templates, and they've got DAGs examples and all kinds of like really cool types of automation pieces so that you can kind of see the nuts and bolts of how it all stitches together.
If you want to go a little bit closer, as John said there in the GitOps repository, so either in the GitOps template or when you create a cluster with Kubefirst, you're going to have the name of your cluster in the GitOps repo. You're going to have the name of your cluster. You're going to have a component from your registry, and in that folder, you're going to have Argo workflow, and in that folder, you're going to have CWFTS, I think.
Yep.
Maybe without the S, and you're going to have like the YAML file with the CWFT. So if you really want to understand how those things are working, want to update them, modify them, add stuff to it, again, that's the beauty of Kubefirst. Like the GitOps repo is yours, so do what you have to do.
Fred, the depth with which you're able to recite those directories in the GitOps template repository is enough to bring a single tear to my eye. That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
I spent way too much time with those CFT last week, so
right on.
they're engraved in my mind now.
So let's take a look. We've covered kind of the build flow. We've covered the charts directory. We've covered sort of in a bit of a topical way how pipelines begin and how those releases get shipped out the door. But we haven't talked about the desired state at all. So the other repository that you get when you do a Kubefirst installation is this GitOps repository here. It has two main sections about it. There's the registry of the GitOps content that gets bootstrapped to your cluster. All of that content is in registry and then / whatever your cluster name is. This is a little confusing because I named my cluster Metaphor. Forgive me for that. That's bad demo juju on my part. But I know it's terrible. But anyway, it's GitOps registry and then whatever your cluster name is. And then this is how everything gets into your Kubernetes cluster in a GitOps way. Now in here, we have development YAML, and the development YAML says, hey, go to registry Metaphor components development to see what's in development. So if we go to components development, here we can see that there's a Metaphor YAML and a Docker config YAML. And you can see that same manifestation here. Like if we pull up the registry, this is how everything got added to the cluster. And then if we look at development, it has two things in it. It has Metaphor development and a Docker config, just like this directory here has Metaphor and the Docker config. And if we look at Metaphor itself, this is the instance of delivering desired state in GitOps. We're basically saying, hey, we have this chart. We want to deploy Metaphor. We want it to be this specific release candidate version. And that's the whole story. So from a CI standpoint, when you're buying into GitOps, at least on Argo CD, I believe it has to be the same on Flex CD, although I'm less experienced. All you're doing is setting that desired state for your CI. So you never do you would never script something that does a kubectl apply. You would never script something that does a Helm install of your application to the development namespace or anything like that. That technique is a technique that's colloquially referred to as ScriptOps. And GitOps works differently. GitOps says, hey, instead of scripting the delivery of these applications, let's set the desired state of what you want in Kubernetes and depend on an engine just to make sure that that happens, that it reconciles from that source of truth in Git. And if there's any problem, that it reports back to you about what the problem is. So that's how GitOps works in our CI. Instead of kubectl applying or Helm installing that release candidate chart to your development environment, all we have to do in our CI is set this value. So when you look at our CWFTs, you may be a little bit confused, like, what are you doing? All you're doing is setting something in Git. How is that a deployment? That's a deployment because of the GitOps practice and because there's this Argo CD engine watching all of the directories in this registry, and anything that's different in the desired state from the actual state, Argo CD is just going to wake up and try and reconcile. And as long as it's successful, no problem. If there's any error, it'll tell you about the error. So with that in mind, each one of these instances also has a values YAML implementation. And this is where you get to specify the individual details about what it is about your application instances that are different from one another. So for example, you can see right here, we had to override the TLS host for certificates, and we had to override the host for the ingress mapping because every instance of this application has to have a different host name. They can't all share the same host name, or they would collide with each other and be competing for ownership of that particular host. So we have the Metaphor development one set to Metaphor development. We have the staging instance of this same application set to Metaphor staging. And because we have the Metaphor application integrated with external secrets and external DNS and Ingress Nginx, this thing is able to just automatically recognize that there's a host name. It's automatically going to create the DNS-A record for you. It's automatically going to create new certificates for you, bind that to your application, so that you have certs from Let's Encrypt that are production-ready certs that are trusted by everybody's browser immediately without really needing to do any hard work yourself. So to show an example of sort of the power of GitOps, let's go back to development, and let's take a look at what happens when we have a new host name. So this section here, we're going to create a copy of, and this section here, we're going to create a copy of. And instead of development, we're going to do demo there and there. Now, if I went to metaphordemo.yourcompany.io right now, there's nothing there. This thing is just like, yeah, there's no such thing as that in the world. That's because we haven't done this demo yet. So let's do this demo and see if we can't make that host appear and how that looks like when you're adding or augmenting the desired state of a particular instance of your application in an Argo CD ecosystem that has all of these great cloud native tools pre-wired and configured to work with each other. So I'm going to commit this directly to the main branch. Fred, close your eyes. I know this is scary stuff to see. And boop, I did it. No approvals. Look at me, Mom. Fred's mad again. We're going to go to the development application here. So Argo CD runs on a 2-minute poll. So we don't have to hit this refresh button. I'm just doing that to kind of expedite that 2-minute process and make it wake up. And you can see that it identified that there was a change. It automatically starts changing whatever it is that I changed about that desired state. Now, in this particular instance, you can see what happens when something's not good yet. It creates this red heart. If you ever accidentally set like the wrong path in your vault secret in an external secrets and it wasn't able to pull the secret from that path, you would see that red heart under that circumstances also. It's just like, oh, broken heart, something's not right in the world. Let's take a look and see what's going on. Now, in this case, everything's soon to be right. It's just not right yet. What we did was we said, hey, this development application of Metaphor, we want it to resolve on Metaphor development.yourcompany.io, but we also wanted to resolve on Metaphor demo.yourcompany.io. Now, the system woke up, external DNS woke up and said, hey, if that's the case, then we're going to need a new A record for Metaphor demo.yourdns.io. And it recognized that there's an ingress with that DNS, and it's automatically creating an A record in my hosted zone. And then right after it does that, and that DNS propagates, Cert Manager wakes up and says, hey, if you need a cert, the cert that I created for you a moment ago only is good for the Metaphor development.yourcompany.io. Now you're saying that it should honor 2 different hosts, and I need to ask for a new cert that embodies both of those certificates. So it created a second certificate request that went out to Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt confirmed via this temporary ingress that it creates. and an HTTP 01 check that we are the owner of the domain that we say that we are. Once it's able to do that verification, it provides the cert to Cert Manager. Cert Manager makes the secret available in TLS. And then just like that, we get a new pod. Now that DNS does need a little bit of time to propagate. The DNS world is just a flaky world where you just have to sort of sit around and tap your toe for 5 minutes every once in a while. But at this point, I believe that we should probably be able to go to, what is it, Metaphor demo your company IO, and voila, this is the development instance. Now, that's probably not a great setup because this is probably expecting that there's an API backend at that same route, and I didn't do that work. But you can see that this is all resolving. This is the development instance of the Metaphor application. It has a new certificate. Let's take a look at that.
And while you look at the certificate, Abby is saying that is sweet, neatly integrated. And you know what? I cannot agree more with that comment.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate that. So you can see we've got this Metaphor development, your company IO cert. It happens to have alternate name somewhere in here of Metaphor demo. I won't bore you with that detail, but trust me, it's in there, or else it wouldn't be considered valid. And that's how you get an application to be available on the Kubefirst platform, on the public internet with a good cert. It's really, truly not that tough. You just have to have the right combination of these great cloud native tools, monitoring the stuff that you want monitored, and a little bit of rigidness in the GitOps directory structure and setting the individual values for each one of those instances. Now, the Vault story is very much the same way. This development secret here, if we were to create a new version of this and call it, Demo Secret 1 and Demo Secret 2 and hit save, this won't be a Vault deep dive. We have a whole different deep dive on Vault. But just by setting that value, over here in Argo CD for the development instance, this external secret here is going to pulse. There it just pulsed. And then if the next time there's a new instance of this Metaphor development container, it takes maybe about 15 boring seconds. You got any elevator music for us there, Fred? We got a couple seconds to blow here. Ooh, yeah.
It's coming up. Oh, we never reached that point.
Yeah, this is
new. Change the vibe, man.
I know. Second verse, same as the first.
It's not happening.
All right, there we go. So we got our, I think I actually just needed to refresh the page. I think it was stuck. But in any event, we've got this Metaphor pod now. If I go to this Metaphor development instance, this time we get Demo Secret 1, Demo Secret 2. We're pulling new secrets out of Vault, making it available to an individual instance of the application, but we have not impacted staging or production. They have their own space for their own secrets, so you can promote changes to secrets the same way you promote your application. So, Fred, I think that's most of what I was hoping to cover. We did Vault, we did CI, we showed some mods and got deployment out the door. We did GitOps individual instances and check that out, and how to set config maps and how to pull in environment variables, how to pull them in from a config map, how to pull them in from a secret, how to get secrets out of Vault, how to not depend on Vault real time, how to get DNS automatically created, how to get automatic certs. This thing's up and on the internet. I mean, that's not bad for Kubernetes environment that didn't even exist at an hour and a half ago. So
and it's even better considering that Metaphor application basically create a really minimalist page that display like 10 lines of information, but we spent 1 hour talking about it. But to be honest, we're a little bit tricky. It was not that much a deep dive on metaphor, more about like, hey, how metaphor can help you understand how to integrate your own application within a cluster you created with Kubefirst. So good job, John. I think we went from A to Z and we mentioned everything and anything. So yeah, I think
Thank you,
that's
buddy.
good. I think that's good. So as a reminder, or for those of you that are new, we support AWS, Civo, and Key3D, which give you the opportunity to try Kubefirst locally without even using any cloud provider. It's using Docker and Key3D. Or you can also try other tools than Docker, but you may have some surprises depending on like which tool you're using, but still it's up there. And the good news is that since I think it's 2.1, we added the support for DigitalOcean, Vultr, and Google Cloud. The three are in beta. So if you use the CLI, you're going to have to do Kubefirst beta, DigitalOcean, contrary to, let's say, Civo that is not in beta, where it can do like Kubefirst, Civo directly come in. I would say, to be honest, DigitalOcean Vault, I feel that they're pretty stable. I think I'm going to petition the engineering team to do one last couple of tests, and I think we could probably move them to from beta to something stable. Google Cloud, we need a little bit of work still on it, but I think we're really, really close. And with that said, all those clouds are available. You can use GitHub or GitLab with them, which is used basically for most of everything we've shown you today. We showed you with the example with GitHub, but it's also working with GitLab. About that, you saw some banner during the show. You can try it at home. It's on GitHub, Kubefirst/Kubefirst. The name of the organization and the repo is the same. You can create a new Kubefirst cluster using the CLI, but also since 2.1, actually, we have the new UI installation. So have fun if you prefer to do this in a sexy, beautiful, nice environment within your browser. There's a couple of ways to do that. If you want to learn more how to do that, you can go check our docs. If you need any help whatsoever during the cluster creation, if you have questions that you didn't want to ask during the live, or you're watching the recording, or you just think about those questions after about Metaphor or anything else, join us on our Slack community. It's at kubefirst.io/Slack. We are pretty quick, I think. I need to pat ourselves on the back. We're pretty quick about answering any question. And the good things, though, is that, yes, it's a Kubefirst Slack community, but, it's about cloud native. It's about Kubernetes. It's about the tools you're going to use on your cluster. So it doesn't mean that we know everything, but like within the team, we have a pretty broad experience when it comes to cloud native. So if you have questions that are specific to Argo CD, even not related to Kubefirst, you know what? Join the Slack community, ask away, and we're going to be more than happy to help you if we know the answer. On that note, any last word, John?
Yeah. We need jokes, Fred. You got any jokes?
I have one. And to be honest, those jokes, I'm searching them on the web, and the kind of jokes that I can use on that live stream are reaching a point where like it's slowly
Dwindling.
going to the end.
Yeah.
And yeah, one last comment before I go to the joke. Abby, who looks like he stayed the full hour. So first, congratulations for listening to John for that long. I was sleeping a couple of times during the live. No, that's a joke. No, John was pretty good, but I hope and I'm not spamming. You are not spamming. So let me answer that first thing for you. But Kubefirst is on the KDS operating system. So can't wait to set it up on Docs soon, which is pretty cool. And please let us know what's your experience. So not just Abby, everyone trying Kubefirst. We are eager to learn more about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because it's a complex platform. I think we have a pretty stable and great product, but there's so many moving pieces together, so many types of like configuring things. So some some things may go wrong. Please let us know if there is any feature that are missing you're looking for. Also, let us know. This is a way. Your feedback is really important because this is how we can improve the product. This is how we can move forward. This is how we can add features that are important to the community. So, on that note, what did the programmer quit her job?
Why did the programmer quit her job?
Because she didn't get a raise. A raise.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. Let's do that one. Yeah.
So
I'm proud of you,
on
Fred.
that,
Well done. Well done.
I shouldn't get like all the congratulations for those jokes because they're not mine, but I think the delivery is everything. So on that note, thanks for joining us, and see you in 2 weeks for the next Kubefirst Live.
See everybody.